we've seen Paris 2024, the Olympic and Paralympic Games, that have also taken a pretty public and supportive stance towards the VCM. We've been fortunate enough to work with them to help them retire over 1.3 million tons in credits from the VCM. So I think we are starting to see bigger organizations pulling away and kind of leading the way.
Carbonsations, today's carbon industry leaders.
Welcome to the Carbonsations podcast, where we speak to some of the leading figures in the emerging carbon industry. Today, we're joined by Valerio Magliulo, the co-founder and CEO of Abatable. Abatable is a leading provider of carbon offsetting and procurement services. Valerio, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, you may already be familiar with the format, but if not, we really like to get a good understanding of our guests' background and their path that essentially brought them to the carbon industry. So it would be great if you could tell us more about what you used to do before Abatable.
Thank you, Violet, and thank you for having me. Sure. So to get started, I think my career really started early on in the finance industry, particularly in banking, looking at large corporate transactions. I have a sort of academic background in international finance. Quickly pivoted into tech. So I've been in the tech industry for, I would say, 90% of my career in different organizations in varying capacity, but typically almost always looking at the product and so the technology that was being used and how to scale it to sometimes millions of customers, sometimes billions in the case of Google and Meta. And I think the sort of connecting thread across all of those career steps has always been using technology for good and for social good specifically. So I always looked at it, what kind of societal problems am I interested in? And I think technology can play a role to help them solve or address them. So at Monzo, I looked a lot at financial inclusion, particularly in the UK. At Google DeepMind, I was focused on healthcare outcomes and using machine learning and artificial intelligence to drive better technology in a clinical setting. And most recently, I was at Meta, leading up all of the COVID and vaccine fake news department globally. And so really trying to understand the role that technology can play in solving some of the big societal challenges. So for me, when I started to look into the climate space as an area that was quite a strong interest in, and speaking with Maria, my co-founder, who had been working at Goldman Sachs in ESG and impact investing, I became really fascinated about how sort of we finally had a currency, so to speak, right? Carbon, to price environmental liabilities, to price the impact that organizations were having on the environment. And so the idea of then trying to develop a technology and services around that technology to help as many organizations interact and engage with the market just felt really a really good fit with what I enjoy doing and what I'm passionate about.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing. And can you walk us through what it was like to co-found Abatable?
So Maria and I actually, it's a pretty funny story. I don't think it's ever been told as publicly as I'm about to, but we met for really a casual coffee where I was telling her a few things I was up to. We've been friends for over 13 years. That's the background story. And she was telling me about some of the things that she was interested in. And it really escalated quite quickly in a lot of energy around the fact that there was a gap in the market for an advanced solution to help organizations find the right projects and fund the right projects. And so we went through, trials and tribulations to very quickly stand up Abatable, launch Abatable. We went through an accelerator in California called Y Combinator, and then just sort of gone live and, been building out the business ever since. And so I think the one thing that I will probably say is that when I started out the business, there's a lot of excitement around what we were doing, but never in a million years I could have predicted that, we were not just building a business, we were actually working to build a market and an industry around us as well. So that level of, cross-industry collaboration and advocacy and sort of transparency around new frameworks and new things we were developing, I think not something I could have predicted that was critical for us to succeed and for sort of our mission to be meaningful.
Excellent. And for those of our listeners who are perhaps unfamiliar with your work, could you give us a brief overview of the kind of services that Abatable provides?
Certainly. So Abatable provides the tools for organizations to navigate the carbon markets and find the right path towards climate impact. We do that primarily through two pillars. One is our carbon sourcing technology and services. That's where we help connect project developers directly with the source of capital and with the corporate buyers. And so we, through our platform and our solutions, we help organizations find the right projects, vet those projects, and transact with a high degree of confidence. And the other sort of side of things is our market intelligence offering. So it's all of the data, the analytics, the frameworks, the models, and the research that we provide back to market participants, really to help advance the market as a whole, right? To continuously develop and improve and become a global environmental market as we hope it to be. So those two solutions are the pillar of what Abatable does, and they continuously reinforce each other because of our high degree of activity in the market, supporting corporates and investors in their carbon transactions. We come across a lot of sort of data and insights about the market to help make sense of the market, to help those customers make sense of the market. And so they continuously reinforce each other.
Thank you. So without further ado, we can go ahead and dive straight into the major issues that are currently on everybody's minds as far as carbon credits, carbon markets are concerned. Abatable published a report back in March, which said that the voluntary carbon market was at a critical point. Do you believe that's still to be the case? And what are some of the main challenges that you're seeing at this time?
I think we are still at a critical juncture for the carbon markets. I think over the past year and a half or so, we've seen so many initiatives market-wide to tackle integrity issues that we witnessed in the sort of first and second iteration of the VCM. The IC-VCM core carbon principles really jumped to mind as a key development for the market. Sort of that stamp of approval that is market-wide on what we all agree to be a definition of integrity and quality. And so, while that's been a great initiative to see, that's still, in the process of being rolled out, right? And so I think number one of the challenges that we're seeing today is how quickly will that sort of become the de facto norm, right? And standard bearer in the market for quality and integrity. So I think what we've seen over the past year is that we can see a path for the supply side of the market to scale where we need it to be. The bigger challenge is really on the demand side. It's really on what are the incentives for corporates to expand their action, to expand their investments and their involvement in the carbon markets. It is, as the name kind of gives it away, it's still a voluntary market. So it largely still relies on the corporates and organizations' willingness to go above and beyond what they're already doing with regards to reducing their own emissions and supporting climate action outside of the value chain. And so those incentives really are lacking and they need to be put in place. We can talk for hours about whether there needs to be a carrot or a stick or a combination of both. But reality is we need those incentives to be put in place.
Absolutely. And from your perspective, have there been any changes since the rollout of the IC-VCM's core carbon principles?
I think it might be a little bit premature. I think to kind of make an assessment on the effectiveness and the impact it's had on the market. I think the only thing we can say is, largely speaking, the market has corralled pretty quickly behind and throw their support behind the IC-VCM. And I think that's a great thing. I think that's a great testament to the willingness of many of the market participants to find a solution to some of the integrity challenges we've seen. In more specific terms, we have started to see some methodologies and some standards that have not met the bar for the IC-VCM, which we expected. At Abatable, we predicted that, and so we released a prediction in March around which methodologies we believed would fit under would qualify for the core carbon principles labels. And so that means that this process and this initiative is doing what the market is expecting it to do. It's helping to weed out those projects that are kind of falling short in terms of integrity and quality of the sort of environmental attributes. But there's still a long way to go, right? There's still, I think, the projects that are also been responsible for the vast majority of the market issuances, still needing to go through that process. And so that will have a dramatic impact on what would be the available supply of CCP labeled projects and credits in the coming years, right? So that could have massive impact. There's about 374 million tons, I believe, that, or something thereabouts, of issued by projects that fall under one of those renewable energy methodologies that have already been retired by companies in the past, right? And there's another 200 plus million that are still unretired. So a big question in terms of understanding the success of IC-VCM will be what's going to happen? What's going to happen to these projects when they don't complete the bar? Is there a transition pathway that is being developed by the standards, to smoothly transition some of these projects towards higher quality, more conservative quantification methodologies, or will they be completely written off? And what impact will that have on prices is, again, sort of a consequence of that line of reasoning. So I think this is going to shape the market, and it is quite important to understand and assess it once we see a little bit more activity on it.
Excellent. And in that line of thought, how are things looking on the demand side of the market? Would you say there are any changes specifically in the behavior of corporates and mid-sized players?
Well, I think Abatable really came into play in full effect in 2021, which is 3 years ago. It was right before Glasgow, which I think was the sort of one of the most consequential COPs for the VCM, in the sense that it really spurred a lot of action, right? There was a lot of excitement and we saw a massive increase in activity after that. 2023 was kind of hesitation, I think was the word of the year for the VCM. There was so much that was happening. The integrity initiatives we just talked about were sort of starting to take shape. And so a lot of companies were, I think, just wait and see mode, really to see how quickly this will be implemented, what will be the outcome, how accepted would they be by the market. And I think we are starting to see signs of corporate demand rebounding and being a bit more effective and active in the market. We've seen the Symbiosis Coalition been taking a very strong stance and saying that they do believe nature-based solutions are going to play a critical role in the net zero strategy of the coalition members. And a lot of other organizations are taking note, right? Like we've seen Paris 2024, the Olympic and Paralympic Games, that have also taken a pretty public and supportive stance towards the VCM. We've been fortunate enough to work with them to help them retire over 1.3 million tons in credits from the VCM. So I think we are starting to see bigger organizations pulling away and kind of leading the way. There is generally still a mild sense of, I don't want to call it anxiety, but, maybe let's use the word anxiety for that. And in kind of trying to understand the role that carbon credits play into the existing frameworks for net zero strategies and sustainability strategies, right? So there have been concerns around the weight of SBTI, the Science Based Targets initiatives, in facilitating and incentivizing the use of carbon credits as part of net zero standards they've developed. And I think another big trend that we're going to have to wait and see for the next couple of months, how that develops.
Excellent. And Valerio, I'm glad you've mentioned the Paris Olympic Games. I was actually curious to get to know more details about this partnership and how it came about, and anything you could tell us about it, really.
Yeah, I mean, we've been very transparent with it. We've been encouraged as well, Paris 2024, to be very transparent with the activities. And so loads we can say about it, probably fits a couple of episodes of podcasts. But I think generally speaking, it's obviously been an exciting project for us to work on. It's been, as you can imagine, it's been quite a long and tenuous project because of how complex, an organization like Paris 2024 is. And we've been sort of their primary partner for their climate contribution strategy. So they have set quite an ambitious agenda to be, one of the most sustainable Olympic and Paralympic Games in history. And what they've done is they really try to reduce roughly by half the emissions of an Olympic and Paralympic game compared to previous editions like London and Rio, and then use the remaining carbon budget to contribute to projects and activities that were happening outside of the scope of the Paris Games and the value chain. And so, over the past few years, we've been working with them to not only to revisit and refine the strategy as the market was developing, right, which is not an easy thing to do, but also run a competitive and transparent process to identify as many project proposals that would fit the requirements, their strategy, their quality criteria, and really boil it down to a final portfolio that we've helped them structure and transact with. And that really actually took place across a range of projects and geographies, really highlighting the sort of the diversity of the VCM and all the different technologies that are sort of available and within reach. And so I think the reason I'm really excited about this project, I'm excited to talk about it because it really does demonstrate a lot of what Abatable can do for the market and for market participants, not only in terms of finding the project and really deep sourcing and market-wide sourcing capabilities, but also offering the tools to understand how the market is shaping and how that might affect their strategy and their procurement. So yeah, I think that's been exciting. We've talked previously about symbiosis, and I also mentioned Paris as an example. I hope this will be first of all, a blueprint for future games and future large sporting events to follow, to really focus on lasting and positive legacy, not just in terms of the sports, but also for crime and nature and people, but also a blueprint for other large complex organizations that are looking at the VCM as a tool in the toolbox and incentivize them to lean more heavily into it.
I'm also very curious if you could give us a sneak peek into your vetting process. I'm sure it's very rigorous and there's a whole bunch of things that go into it, but if you could just give us like an outline of more or less what that looks like, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we have, for anyone who's interested, we do have a transparent framework and in the form of a white paper on our website that is free for anyone to download and take a look, to kind of just take a look under the hood of what Abatable does when it comes to due diligence and vetting. But broadly speaking, what we look at is what are the bigger risk areas for a carbon project to be successful, not only from a sort of carbon perspective, but also from impact on nature and biodiversity and sort of an engagement and involvement of local communities surrounding the projects. So what we typically do is a mix of data-driven, desk-based assessment to kind of understand which risk areas might be more prominent or might be more relevant for a specific project proposal. Then spend a lot of time with those project developers to understand their perspective, understand project design decisions that might have impacted on their view, right? And how they plan to mitigate some of those risks, particularly as new technologies and new solutions are being developed, such as digital MRV and dynamic baselining and whatnot. And then in particular cases, and it has been the case for Paris 24, we also conduct site visits to really go and see the operations and the activities on the ground and see for ourselves and understand how the project is being carried out and key milestones and whatnot.
It sounds really, really inspiring, and I think it's a fantastic achievement, both for Abatable, but also like in and of itself, that major organizations like this are starting to actively participate in the VCM. Do you plan any more similar partnerships like this in the future?
Absolutely. Yeah, we've got a few that we're cooking up and a few that we're in sort of long discussions on. I'm so really excited about unveiling them hopefully in the coming months. I think that model of deep partnership with a very large organization and sort of walking them through the sort of the complexities of the VCM and kind of providing them the security and the confidence, right, to carry out those investments and those transaction decisions is really what motivates us at Abatable, is what we decide to specialize ourselves in. And that's what a lot of the case studies that we have are centered around that kind of approach and those kind of projects.
Lovely. Valerio, another thing I wanted to ask you about is your recent release of the market intelligence feature Themes. What can you tell us about it?
So, as I mentioned before, market intelligence platform really is a collection of insights, research, analytics, and frameworks that we have developed at Abatable, thanks to our in-house experts, to really make sense of the market, right? To understand the bigger risks and the bigger unknowns in the VCM. A lot of those tend to be in the form of, pricing insights and policy risk and supply developments. And then what we realized, particularly after speaking to a lot of our customers, is that there are a lot of initiatives and specific market topics that have come about they kind of cut across all of these different modules. They cut across all of these different sort of topics, And the first one being really CORSIA, so the aviation scheme for offsetting. And so the CORSIA theme that we've developed at Abatable touches upon, what policies are being developed across different countries, particularly around corresponding adjustments. And so understanding which projects and which countries may be more fertile grounds for CORSIA eligible supply. But it touches on prices, right? Like how are prices going to look differently for CORSIA eligible credits versus, the whole of the VCM and supply and demand and whatnot. And so really the team we've built is a collection of insights across all of these different areas of expertise that Abatable has, and just bringing them all under a single umbrella to provide a coherent and cohesive view of a specific topic or a theme that our customers are interested in. And so CORSIA was the first one we've launched, and then we followed up with the IC-VCM's core carbon principles as a second theme. And then there's a few more that we're working on right now that we're excited about.
On that note, since you mentioned risk and, your customers kind of getting a feel for the risks of different projects, what is your stance on insurance? Does Abatable offer any kind of carbon insurance, or is that in the works maybe?
No, I think we do enough of our own already without doing insurance. But I am excited about developments in the insurance space. We have friendly relationships with all of the insurance provider in the space, both, traditional insurance players, but also the new ones that have come into the market specifically with VCM products. And in reality, insurance at its core is a essential tool, right, to manage risk effectively, particularly when you're deploying millions and hopefully at some point billions in dollars and in capital. And so I've been particularly excited about some specific insurance products that have been developed. And we are hoping that we can contribute to those efforts by way of providing insights and data analytics in the market. I'm very excited about partnering with some of them in the future.
Excellent. And speaking of that, what else is in the pipeline for Abatable?
Yeah, so again, another full podcast episode, hopefully. There's a lot of really exciting stuff happening. I think, obviously it's been very busy for us since the Paris 2024 announcement. We've got some product launches that are coming up. Don't know if they will be out by the time the podcast is out, but we're going to be going live during New York Climate Week with some of these new developments, specifically geared towards providing as much transparency and as much data back to as many market participants as possible. So, it's never been our intention and never will be to sort of be a gatekeeper of information and knowledge in this market. So the more we can do, and we've typically done it by sharing reports and webinars and so on and so forth with everyone in the market, the more we can share, the more we'll do that. So that's a big push towards greater transparency and giving back to as many market participants as possible. The second one, I can talk a bit more extensively about because it's our VCM Investment Attractiveness Index. We launched that last year. That was the first edition, which is effectively ranking all countries in the world against their potential to harness what I believe the power of the carbon markets to be. And so we typically look at, institutional capacity, ease of doing business, or just investability of a country, but also what is the climate, the nature, and people opportunity, right, in that specific country. And so we take a very data-driven approach to sort of produce our rankings. It'll be super interesting to see how results have changed since last year, which countries have gone up in the ranking, which countries perhaps have fallen a little bit behind, and providing some insight on that. So that will be launched as well soon. And the last one is really more surrounding our carbon sourcing efforts. Again, we're kind of in a very privileged position because we've worked with so many project developers by now. We have over 250 project developers with an account on our platform, sort of putting forward proposals for our clients. And so what we want to do is create even more avenues for those project developers to realize sales, to find partners for their projects. So watch out for Q4, where we'll be making some announcements around that and hopefully participate in what we see every year as being the end of year rush and sort of boom, the busiest time of the year for the VCM.
That's excellent news, and I'm really excited to be following Abatable's progress moving forward. Valerio, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing with us all the important work you guys are currently doing. It's been a pleasure.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Carbonsations podcast and would like to hear more conversations like this, please be sure to subscribe. We really appreciate the support.